In the darkest chapter of the 20th century, when freedom stood on the edge of extinction, young Americans answered a call that would define a generation. They crossed oceans, left families behind, and climbed into machines of war knowing that many would never return. From the skies over Europe, the United States Army Air Forces carried the weight of a nation's hope, proving that democracy would not fall quietly. Among the men who fought this battle above the clouds was a unit whose courage became legend, the USAAF 55th Fighter Group. The 55th was formed in 1940 at Hamilton Field in California, at a time when war still felt distant to many Americans. But history was moving fast. After multiple reorganizations, the unit became the 55th Fighter Group, made up of the 38th, 338th, and 343rd Fighter Squadrons. In September 1943, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Frank B. Jones, the group deployed to England. At that moment, only 6 American fighter groups were attached to the 8th Air Force, and the air war over Europe was far from decided. What set the 55th apart immediately was its aircraft. The group became the first in the 8th Air Force to fly the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Sleek, fast, and unmistakable with its twin-boom design, the P-38 was a versatile weapon of war. It served as a fighter, bomber escort, ground attack aircraft, night fighter, and reconnaissance platform. In fact, nearly 90% of all aerial film captured over Europe during World War II was shot from the P-38. Through its cameras, history itself was recorded in motion. By July 1944, the 55th transitioned to a new aircraft, the North American P-51 Mustang. This change would define the remainder of the group's war. The Mustang was fast, long-ranged, and deadly, armed with 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns and capable of carrying bombs and rockets. Most importantly, it could escort bombers all the way to Berlin and back. With the Mustang, the United States finally gained air superiority over Europe, breaking the backbone of the German Luftwaffe and turning the tide of the war. Operating from bases in England, first at Nothamstad and later at Warmingford, the pilots of the 55th Fighter Group flew some of the most dangerous missions of the war. They escorted heavy bombers deep into enemy territory, knowing that German fighters and flak would be waiting. They also flew low-level attack missions against rail yards, locomotives, bridges, oil depots, and military convoys. These brutal sorties earned them the nickname Loco Busters, a testament to the sheer number of enemy trains and locomotives they destroyed. The cost was enormous. By 1944, pilot losses in the group were estimated to exceed 50%. It was into this unforgiving environment that Second Lieutenant James Ragsdale McCutcheon arrived. Jim McCutcheon was born on September 13, 1923, in Fort Davis, Texas, and raised on a ranch in West Texas. As a boy, he built balsa wood model airplanes and dreamed of flight, unaware that this childhood passion would one day carry him into combat. He was strong, independent, and outspoken, standing over 6 feet tall at a time when few men did. Life hardened him early. By the age of 16, Jim had lost both of his parents and moved in with relatives. Despite the hardships, he pushed forward, attending Texas A&M University before leaving school to enlist in the United States Army Air Forces. After completing pilot training, Jim earned his wings and qualified to fly the P-51 Mustang. In August 1944, Jim arrived in England as a replacement pilot with the 55th Fighter Group's 338th Fighter Squadron. Among veteran pilots hardened by months of combat, Jim was new, eager, and determined to prove himself. His height earned him the nickname Big Stoop, but behind the nickname was a young man barely 20 years old, stepping into one of the most lethal theaters of the war. Just 9 days after arriving at Warmingford, Jim flew his first and final combat mission.
On August 12, 1944, the 55th Fighter Group was ordered to attack rail yards near Metz, France. These rail yards were critical to the German war effort, transporting fuel, ammunition, and troops. The mission was a classic railroad rodeo: low altitude, heavy fire, and little margin for error. Jim flew as the wingman to his flight leader, carrying two 500-pound bombs beneath his Mustang's wings. As the flight began its dive from 7,000 feet, anti-aircraft fire erupted from the ground. Bombs were released, engines roared, and tracers streaked through the air. Jim followed his leader into the attack, but as the flight pulled away and attempted to regroup, he was no longer visible. Radio calls were unanswered. In the chaos of combat, it was initially assumed he had continued strafing on his own. Only later did the grim reality set in. Jim McCutcheon was missing. German records later revealed the truth. Jim's P-51 was hit by anti-aircraft fire near Revigny-sur-Ornault and destroyed. The aircraft was almost completely obliterated. Jim was killed instantly. He was 20 years old. But even in death, Jim's sacrifice did not go unnoticed. The people of Revigny-sur-Ornault recovered Jim's body, identified him by his bracelet, and buried him with respect in their military cemetery. Flowers were placed on his grave until occupying forces destroyed them. For the French civilians living under occupation, Jim was not just an enemy pilot fallen from the sky. He was a symbol of liberation. Decades later, Jim's great-nephew traveled to France to uncover what had happened that day. What he found was remarkable. The town still remembered August 12, 1944. Local officials preserved Jim's records, his death certificate, and eyewitness accounts. In an emotional ceremony, the town posthumously honored Jim McCutcheon with a town medal, recognizing his sacrifice nearly 80 years after his final flight. Today, Second Lieutenant James Ragsdale McCutcheon rests at the Epinal American Cemetery and Memorial in France, among more than 5,000 Americans who gave their lives in World War II. He never lived to see victory. He never returned home. But his courage, and the courage of the men of the 55th Fighter Group, helped secure a future where freedom endured. Their story is not just history. It is a reminder of what ordinary Americans were willing to give when the world needed them most. And it is a legacy written forever in the skies over Europe.